Great. Welcome, everybody. It is Tuesday, February 24th, and you are in Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs, where we are going to really begin to make some decisions about the housing bill that we have before us. Some sections are more complicated than others, and I'm hoping that as we walk through it together, we begin to sign off, sort of make some decisions about sections that we're okay with, sections we think we need more information on, and sections that you really have a difficult time supporting altogether. This is Randy's traffic light metaphor a little bit, which is, yes, slow down, more information, and I'm fine, good to go. And so we're looking, Cam has kindly drafted 1.1, which has been posted for people who are watching online and which we have in our hands. And Keisha has Mira today, so she may be in and out. I don't know. But I have a notion of the things that she wants us to continue to work on. So, Cam, if you would be kind enough, just, I sent everybody a summary, sort of a section by section this weekend, so that people could at least get a notion of, so they could mark down what they were good with, what's a challenge, and what needed more work. So, if you'd be kind enough to just let's just take it section by section and talk about what we still need to work on or not, and then we'll figure out how we make any time to do that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. I believe you should all have an amendment to 328. So for starters, it may not exactly align section by section, share with what you've shared,
Right.
Because I have deleted one section and inserted a few sections. So just for starters, my apologies there. I was just finished this draft moments before coming into committee, so it also needs to be run through our editing process. Most of the language in here is as was introduced, and some of the language has just been incorporated from some other bills that are in the building, so not too concerned, but there are a few sections that are brand new and do need to go through the editing process. Everything in 1.1 that's new should be highlighted in some form, so for ease of reference. But I will share my screen and we will begin to walk through. Okay. As mentioned, draft 1.1, it's drafted as a strike all amendment for 328. What you have here under section 1, the only thing that's changed is this reader assistance heading. In the bill as introduced, it said housing targets. It's really a section about municipal plans. And
Right.
so I just tweaked it to specify that, this is about the municipal planning documents.
Right.
And so that's the only change. Everything here in section 1 remains as was introduced, but just to kind of remind and walk back through, this would be new language going into Title 24 in the chapter related to regional and municipal plan development. And what this would do is, as you can see there under lines 10 through 13, municipal plan shall include an analysis of regulatory and physical constraints preventing the municipality from developing sufficient housing to meet the regional housing targets developed pursuant to 4348A9. That section is where it references and requires the Department of Housing and Community Development to develop the statewide housing needs assessment. So that's what it's referencing back to, back to those housing targets. I'm not going to go through this line by line unless you all, kind of have questions, but there is a lot of information here that municipalities would have to work through, and it would be a required element of their municipal plan.
And organically, though, I understand it's required as they go forward in their planning process that they include housing targets.
Yes, ma'am. So if they, in my understanding, and I have my colleague Ellen here to help keep me honest, I believe if a municipality has a municipal plan, it's
Right.
supposed to be updated every 8 years.
Every
Not
year.
every municipality has a plan, so this would be if the municipality has a plan, when they go to update it, at the next point of
Yeah.
updating, they would need to comply with this section, and then if the municipality chose to create a plan in the future, they would need to go through this.
Some municipalities obviously do not have a plan.
I think they all are required to. They aren't all required to, but most do.
I do not know the number or percent.
So
Ellen, oh, sorry.
I think you could keep, Ellen, you guys council, legislative council, I think the department has the specific numbers, but, somewhere around 80%. However, municipalities don't necessarily have super strict requirements in their plans. So the, depth and level of detail in the plans does vary. Some towns have pretty just basic plans.
Okay, Randy.
well, the only thing that I'm thinking about is there's nothing in here just that I recall seeing that compels municipalities to have a plan. And that's not the intent of this legislation.
No. If you have a plan, the intent is that you incorporate your housing target. And we have not heard much the country. I do remember, I do think we might just get VLCT in here to, or we'll touch base with Josh and Sam to make sure they've not raised any flags with me. I don't know if they have with other members of the. I do remember that VHFA had a concern, and I cannot remember what it is.
And I spoke with Maura, and she wanted to ensure, my understanding of her concern was wanting to ensure that the references here, the housing targets, was tied back to that statewide housing needs assessment.
Right.
It is in the line 13. So I spoke with her, and I believe her concern was
Alleviated.
Yes.
Okay, right.
I would say if you want to move forward with this section, I think we may want to just do some minor tweaks to make sure that there's a separate section which identifies everything that needs to be in a
Yes,
municipal
which is
plan.
quite a bit.
So we may want to add like a cross-reference in there if this new section is going to go in. And then also, my colleague Ellen, I think, really pointed out that we may want to say the housing element of a municipal plan throughout this section. So there's just a few little minor cleanup pieces that if you all want to keep this section in, I may recommend at your next version of.
So, committee, how are you feeling?
The only thing that's still in the back of my mind is the question. That if the municipality looks at all the things that we do and say, this is too much, and they abolish their plan, can they do that? And I think they can.
So what's their recourse if it's a smaller town and they can do, they all now will have housing targets by December 26th. They'll obviously all have the housing target because we'll have made our way through that piece of 181. Ellen and Cam, what is there any off ramp for that or for? I mean, I think every town will have been handed a housing target and that they will have, I don't know if they have to vote to accept the housing targets or not, or if the RPC and the towns, I mean, those housing targets will be accepted this December.
Well, they don't have a plan. Do they have to accept housing targets?
Oh, they will already be, they will be having housing targets, whether they have a plan or not. Every town will have housing targets.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Is perhaps we should have a chat with VLCT to see, because my guess is that the VLCT would provide a resource for towns that were having challenges with it, and certainly the RPCs would help them. I think they have plenty of resource for help. But it's I think a good question, which is there a way that they can say this is a lot for us and
They can have a target on the wall, but do nothing about it.
yeah.
Didn't they say a couple of weeks ago that small towns are hesitant for this project due to the level of effort?
Yes, I think
Okay.
that's I think what VLCT said, but they were okay with this section, from what I understand. But should we further clarify that if towns, if they're do we need to clarify that where towns have resources for this help? Because we have put aside money for the RPCs with technical assistance on this, on the whole Act 181 work and with the RPCs. So they have helped with the RPCs and with the LCT. Should we articulate that, I mean, stating the obvious, but put a piece in there for,
So I would say there's a statutory section separate from this, which requires the RPCs to provide support. There's, as you all know, there's a difference between statutory requirement and what is actually, capable and practical on the ground. As the section is drafted, it's a requirement, and so a municipality that doesn't have the resource capacity to do this work, you could make it permissive. I don't know the value of the section if you were
if you
to
make
do
it.
that,
Yeah.
but I believe this was coming from the request of the administration, so you would want to hear from them about what their intention behind the language is.
We heard from the administration. I
Okay.
think the intention is to address the housing.
Right, I don't want to speak for them.
Yeah, no,
of the intent
but-
behind what the information is going to be used for, and whether having it permissive or required is better, but.
Uh,
I don't, if you wanted to get into the weeds, this is a little bit outside my area of expertise or knowledge here, but I don't know that there is, if a municipality chooses not to do this in their municipal plan, I don't know that there's any strong recourse against them.
no, there's
My
no
understanding-
enforcement.
Well, so my understanding is they do, and I really should be deferring to my colleague here, but the plans do get reviewed at the regional level, and my understanding is there is some consequence if the plan isn't in conformity with the requirements of the statute. They lose certain, permissive aspects of review, but, it's not.
So we're
much you
getting
see as
Charlie.
consequence.
Charlie Baker was going to come in today to be here as a resource on this. He'll be here tomorrow on the transit corridors, so we can ask him about that. But Thomas.
I don't hear anybody objecting to any of this, and
Yeah.
my humble experience with comprehensive plans, these plans, is that those volunteers, not usually the electeds, it's like planning commissions or otherwise ad hoc committees, they welcome guidance as to what they should focus on. So I'm supportive of this language. I don't see any
Yeah.
concerns or here.
I'm supportive of it too, because if we have a housing crisis, we need to be pretty granular about how each of our communities is dealing with it. And we have all gone through this process now with identifying what our housing targets are. I was stunned at our housing target in Woodstock being a lot less than I thought it should be. So, but I do think we might just hear from VLCT about the smaller towns, that if the town doesn't have a plan, Randy, there's nothing here that compels them to do it. And let's double check with Charlie tomorrow, and we'll check with VLCT about the smaller towns.
And do they have the capability of creating a plan? Some of our very smallest towns, if not, as resources there in the system and doing it.
Yeah, and we know those resources are there, but maybe we could just articulate it more fully. Okay.
Okay,
So are people okay with this if we get sort of, and we're talking about housing targets?
Yes, I have a babysitter.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's very good. I had said that you had Mira today, so you as your table. People are concerned about smaller towns that may not have resources. They have the LCT and they have the RPC. We're going to hear from Charlie tomorrow about the transit corridor, so we can chat with him about this and if there's any other language. But I would green light the elements you'd like to add, the housing element you and Ellen would like to add, and there's another piece of cleanup you want to do in this section.
isn't it?
So I think we're okay in this section, and my sense is good to go if we get some answers from CLCT and the RPCs.
Okay. So I'm going to bring you down to page 3. We'll move to the next section, section 2. This is really the tax credits, the down payment assistance tax credit for the Housing Finance Agency. So if you look at the bottom of page 4, kind of highlighted the discussion or recommendation for you all as I'm aware of it. Current draft extends the tax credit out for another 5 years at $250,000 a year. My understanding is you have a
But we have a request on the
to
table.
increase that to 350,000. So that's why I've highlighted that, but the section doesn't change as it was introduced.
Right. Thomas,
Was any level of this extension in the governor's budget? Or is this above what he forward?
I do not,
You know,
yeah, I do not.
you're under the impression that this is a,
This is an ask.
the 100,000 is an ask above.
the 250.
250.
Okay.
So it's a basic, another 100,000, in our tax expenditure. Bill. I would remind us how successful this program has been. Our only challenge basically has been the trickle of the revolving aspect of it, given the economy and rising cost of houses and people not moving as a result. What is your pleasure? It allows us to keep, my understanding is that the 350 allows us to keep the benefit up to $10,000, which is really valuable as the cost of housing increases. That down payment assistance of 10,000, maintaining that really it matches the home price is increasing, and it makes sense to me that if we're able to keep that level of support in the down payment assistance program, that would be great. What are people's thoughts?
So sure, it seems to hit it upon us as policy committee to find where we would
No.
save 100K somewhere else, or
No.
we just go to appropriation, say, we think this is worth enough. For that.
I think with all of this, our job, as Andy said, I don't have a sandbox for you yet.
Yeah.
But your job is to identify the needs and clarify them. And so if it gets stripped, it gets stripped. But I think there's nothing wrong with our saying, actually, from a housing point of view, this makes a lot of sense. And we would support Vermonters were accessing the market for the first time, trying to get into the house, trying to buy a house for the first time, to have this down payment assistance program with incomes that are already identified in the program. It lowers their mortgage payments, which again, given mortgage interest rate at the moment, it still hasn't come down. So it's a helpful program all the way around for first time home buyers.
I mean, at some point, I think I always feel better if we look at all the appropriations we're seeking and have some sort of prioritization or make sure they're in a box that is even realistic to ask for. But this is a small amount that goes a very long way. So this is toward the top of my list always.
That's a nice way of putting it. It's a small amount that goes a long way. David, what do you think?
So I agree with Senator Hoffman. I would like to just add that as a revolving fund with whatever it is, 10 or 11 years of $250,000 per year, and it's truly a revolving fund, that leveling out at 250,000 is, I think, is appropriate. I didn't hear anything compelling to add another 100,000, but if we prioritize it against other asks, reconsider.
We will, tonight I'll just create, and maybe with Ted, we can, we'll create the asks are fairly straightforward, so we can create a little, a chart, what is in and out of the budget and what are the asks above the budget, of the governor's budget. So are people okay with the section, and then we'll just decide the money, but we're okay with the section, and we will then look at the 100,000 as we look at the rest of the appropriation.
I would just add from my perspective.
Yeah.
I'm always hesitant to add money to a budget that we already have. And I realize that doing things for government is different than it is in the rest of the world. But
We don't have any money. But we have money, we're just
Well,
making
we don't-
different choices. But
We have difficulty, and we're gonna have difficulty this year, from the financial perspective. We're talking about right now, putting money in generally that we don't have in order to do things that are important. And it's not that we're doing things that are frivolous by any means. But when we talk about problems being education spending and all the other issues that we have, we can't keep adding money.
Right, and this isn't adding money, this is just, this is a
Adding
part of the
money.
tax expenditure bill. This means we're collecting 100,000.
Understand, but you say the same thing.
Okay, so
I'm not
I,
enthusiastic about it. I won't violently oppose it, but I'm not enthusiastic about it. And I think that clearly we need to sit down at the end of this and say, how much money have we added? And are there some things in here, in this and other bills that we're supporting that, well, maybe we should take out?
well, I think we're happy to create an appropriations box that we can look at. So I think we're okay with that section. The only question is whether we add the 100,000 or not.
Okay,
Is that my sense? Good. Okay,
page 5.
page 5.
So these next two sections are new. They were not in the bill as introduced. And it's under this reader assistance heading of Vermont Housing Special Fund. I'm going to talk broadly and then I'll come back to the language specifics. What these two sections will do is they will authorize additional credit facilities, or they will expand the current credit facility with the state treasurer's office. So if you're looking at line 10 on that page, currently the treasurer has the authority to establish a credit facility of up to 10% of the state's average cash balance. They take that money and they then loan it out for different initiatives. What these sections would do is it would increase the current limitation from 10% to 12.5%. It would then state that the treasurer can create a separate credit facility of up to 1% of the state's average cash on hand for bulk purchasing, offsite construction, housing, etc. However, that doesn't get you to 13.5% because however much they establish in this new 1% credit facility, they have to reduce the other credit facility by the same amount. So the purpose here was to go up to 12.5 to authorize a specific purpose of up to 1%, but not to go up to 13.5%, if that makes sense. So that's what this first section does here. The section 3, all of this language is primarily just organization and cleanup. But what it's doing in the sub A on line 10, increasing current credit facility to 12.5. And then the sub B beginning on line 14, it's allowing a credit facility of up to 1%. Or, and then this is where you get the sub 2 beginning on line 18. Facilitate housing development through bulk purchasing of off-site constructed housing or to aid in the purchase of off-site constructed housing units. Now moving on to page 6. States that financial losses from that credit facility have to be repaid from this Vermont Housing Special Fund. So that's what the next section does. I'm going to scroll down to page 7. Because this next section 4 creates a Vermont Housing Special Fund with the state treasurer's office. The money going into that fund is the interest that the treasurer's office earns from the loans that they distribute out using those monies in the credit facilities of the previous section. So they have the ability to establish these credit facilities. They issue out loans for certain development projects. The interest they receive on those loans currently goes into the general fund. And what this proposes to do is create a separate housing special fund, take the interest from all of those credit facilities, put in this housing special fund. And then the purpose of those funds is limited here under the bottom of page 7, top of page 8. The treasurer shall use funds under that section to provide capital for housing projects in Vermont that in the treasurer's discretion are necessary to promote the increased availability of housing, including the bulk purchasing of off-site constructed housing, So that is, there's some other kind of, the treasurer may use the funds for administrative costs, et cetera, standard language in the funds piece, but that is what these two sections are doing.
So Thomas,
I don't know if you know this, Cam, but can you help me understand what the current law with the 10% that's currently being set aside is mostly being used for, and how that authorization compares to the purchasing of off-site constructed housing and the purchase of off-site constructed housing units?
As I've done a little bit of research on this, there is no real limitation on what the treasurer can use those funds for, in the sense that it's not limited to just housing, for example, or it's not limited to just offsite purchase of housing. As long as the treasurer is complying with the guidelines that their local investment advisory committee have set up, they can use those funds for all types of economic development activity. It doesn't have to be limited to housing. There is a subsection in there that says that, for example, they can use those funds to help fund infrastructure projects in mobile home parks. So the treasurer has a lot of latitude in what they can use the current 10% for. As long as they're complying with uniform prudent investor principles, et cetera, then they're complying with their guidelines. There's no limitation in a specific area of development.
So to that point, does this necessarily need to be called out, or if this conforms to the Prudent Investor Act, why do we need to explicitly state that they have the authorization to use this money to purchase off-site constructed housing?
So what this language would do is it's adding that 1% credit facility, and it's saying for that 1%, you can only use it for this purpose. So for the 10%, or what is proposed is going up to 12.5%, they could use that for any range of things. But for this 1% piece, if you're going to use this 1% money, you must use it for this purpose. Now, that's a policy decision for you all of whether you want to limit them in that way.
If I may,
yes,
does that circumvent or step aside the prudency requirement? Okay, so this still has to conform to the same prudent standards that is defined in section 81.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Except my apologies, except this was something that the treasurer's office asked for a change, except the interest on the special fund. The interest on the special fund is not limited by the Uniform Prudent Investor Principles Act, because, at least as it was articulated to me, the treasurer's office wanted even more flexibility for those funds, because it's the interest they're receiving back on the loan, so it's not utilizing the state's cash on hand currently. So they felt that they wanted even more flexibility for those pieces. So I just wanted to clarify that in response to your question.
I'd love to hear other thoughts. Yes, I'll just say this. I wish it wasn't the case, but to me, this seems like a highly risky set of an asset to hold on to with these dollars. That in Vermont, I could see these off-site pre-constructed houses not being able to put somewhere because of our regulatory environment. To sit on those for longer periods of time can cost a lot. Carrying costs that we might not necessarily get the repayment of these loans back in a timely fashion because of how I see housing construction go in the state.
I guess I'm more optimistic than that. This is, and I just want to back up to just remind us all that 10%, this is roughly meaning we have 120 million to loan in economic development and housing, which we have used for housing, a lot of housing, a lot of economic development. But it's been a big game changer for a bunch of our housing projects. At 12.5%, it would kick off about 150 million. And I think the 1%, the interest, I don't remember. Keisha, do you remember what the amount was the treasurer was hoping? I think it was about $2 million, but I may be wrong. Does anyone remember that amount?
For what?
Peter, the 1%.
It would be more than, it would be more than
I
that.
can't remember what.
It would be 1% of the 12.5%. The interest coming
Would be
back, they
12.
still want to,
Yeah, which would be about 12 million.
something
12.5,
like that.
yeah.
Yes, yeah.
That is a,
But then they said they wanted to use 6 million just for this.
this is a spectrum program, right? It doesn't have a proven track record. We have.
This is a
Yeah, like,
pilot.
I've heard
It's a,
from it.
it's a pilot. Well, we've heard from Alex. This is the pilot and we've heard from Alex Farrell.
Oh.
Who's maybe this is.
No, Alex, I will say, I mean, I've talked to him. He does not have a strong feeling about the offsite housing at all. You can have it back in, but that was not their interest.
Well, he presented it as such, and it's certainly part of the administration's bill. And I'm happy to have him back on this, but the treasurer and I believe they've been working hand in glove to create this opportunity to help finance this without having to use state resources. I mean, without having to use fees from the budget.
I've said this before, I have no problem with anything, but section 2 set asides are never a good idea in a special fund that constrain entities we otherwise think do a good job managing their flow of risk and capital. So I'm a strong no on provision to subsection 2 on line 18.
I want to make clear, I fully support exploring pilot funds to pilot opportunities for offsite construction housing. I'm just, I have similar concerns about using these dollars to subsidize at a much lower interest rate, what I would take as a highly risky venture that I don't think is going to match the risk for the dollars that the state has in the treasurer's coffers. So I don't want to stop these offsite constructed things moving forward, but I share much concern with using these dollars at this interest rate, these subsidized interest rates.
Okay, David, you have a thought.
Oh, I was waiting for Randy.
Oh,
Chime in.
Randy, what are your thoughts?
I have done. And say I have none, so I'm your point.
Okay,
And I'm hesitant just because if the legislature designates expenditures, but here we are carving out the executive branch having a larger access to the treasury, state
Right.
treasury.
Yeah.
So I'm a little hesitant about that, just kind of opening up the window a little further. And I do have a problem with the state bulk purchasing this effort. If it were less risky or not risky, the commercial market would have already done it.
Right.
So I think it's potentially the reason why the commercial market has done it. It's a potential loser, and I'm very hesitant
okay.
unless I hear something.
Are we interested in having Peter Tremblay and Alex back in? Because my feeling is that Alex's effort, to go back to your point, is that there's more support at the moment for 802 homes, the piece that's in the bill that's in SNRE.
They just want to open up more capital for housing.
Right,
They
right.
have a very little concern about safe to pass.
Great. So I think if we want to hear more, let's get Alex and Peter in to.
But maybe we should hear about some offsite constructed bulk purchasing, that like who are we buying this from?
Well, that's the pilot. So the design of the pilot was.
There's not enough information
yeah.
to do this just based on having 2 people back in where are we getting the offsite constructed housing?
I don't know. We have to find out from Alex. I mean, it's their pilot, so I figured they have thought that out.
Just because we issue a loan for this doesn't mean we're gonna get the money back, is my concern. And I can
Right.
see us sitting on a defaulted loan with a bunch of constructed housing that we can't put anywhere.
We simply don't have enough information. Yeah, I'm saying, but
Okay, great. We'll figure it out and then make a decision hopefully by the end of the week.
So I'm gonna bring you back to page 8, because the next section, which you all have been discussing, so I'm not gonna walk through. This is the offsite construction accelerated pilot. That's why I put the treasurer's sections right above this,
Yeah.
because I see them, as kind of linked, so that's why I inserted it there. You all were just discussing this pilot program, so I'm not gonna walk through. There are no changes in this draft. And it sounds like you're gonna be looking for more information.
I'll just say I'm just a no. Hearing from those 2 folks, I don't think would convince me of anything different. I'd like to give them more access to credit and capital. They can come back with, a clear proposal of why this needs specific risk, or a specific risk allowance more than other important housing needs and projects, but I'm I'm entirely unconvinced that I'm.
Are you okay with taking it up 2.5%?
Yes, yeah.
Right, okay. So I think all of us are in agreement about the first piece of section 3 through line 13. And that the question marks are beyond.
And I'm even okay if they want to experiment with some risk on 1% of it. But this is not a priority above others that we've heard. That I'm not going to be convinced about it.
Again, I would remind us, we need lots of tools in the toolbox. If this is a tool that we can actually use effectively.
We could, if we could use the tool, great. We, as I said, we have given back pre-manufactured housing.
Right. But before we were.
Because of zoning, nothing's changed.
Yes,
Nothing's changed.
other communities, things have changed.
None of
Okay.
this has changed. I wish it had.
More, well, it's changing slowly, sure. So,
Okay,
and 802, a lot of the issues raised in this pilot are addressed in the 802 homes, which is again, a pilot with 3 communities. So anyway, I think that may be where the eggs need to go in the basket at the moment. So next is section 6, the common interest communities.
so moving into the common interest community sections, I haven't changed anything in section 6. I simply highlighted these just based on our conversation that we had on Friday. If you remember, this section is making these provisions retroactive to apply to certain condominiums that existed prior to January 1, 1999, which is when the uniform law went into effect. And my understanding is there was some consensus about not making this retroactive to those communities. I'm just highlighting it here in case you all want.
Well, I think that was wasn't that the constitutional concern, is that we couldn't figure out.
I would like to propose that we make it retroactive to January 1st, 2026.
And you don't need to, yes, ma'am, it would apply to entities that are created after 2011. So you would hit those entities.
That's
Without this language.
Correct. So what this language does in
Okay.
section 6
Yeah.
is it makes these sections apply retroactive to common interest communities created before 1999. Like I said, that's where I think we have a constitutional concern.
yeah.
Separate, in a separate section in Title 27A, which is the Uniform Common Interest Ownership Act, states that for common interest communities with 12 or more units that are created after 2011, any amendment to the title would apply to those entities.
So do we need to say after June 30th, 2026?
I would take this whole section out if you're wanting to bypass the constitutional concern and you don't want to apply it retroactively. You can take this entire section out entirely. You don't need to make any other change. And these provisions would apply to entities created from 2011
Okay.
moving forward.
That seems like
You
a
don't
good
need to make any
compromise.
And I
change.
think that may be a good compromise. We also have heard from a lawyer who deals with common interest communities, so I'd love to have in this week. And she from Kermer Piper, a woman named Christina Jensen, and there was another person who would come with her, and she would like to talk with us about some of the implications. But if that means that we would be retroactive to 2011, we get rid of this. Seems like a good idea.
And it would apply to any common interest community that chooses to amend its declaration of bylaws and come up to, the standards in the Uniform Act. So over time, certain common interest communities are doing that or have done that. I don't know how many haven't chosen to do that exist pre-1999 and want to remain under the laws as they were in 1999, but I think having an attorney come in and speak to their.
You're deleting section 6 in its entirety.
If you do
Yeah.
not need it to apply retroactively, yes, sir, that is what I would do.
And it would apply to that one. So
So
can
we're
you
all-
make sure she needs to come in if we do that?
We'll ask her, and hopefully she's listening. So all of section 6, so that would mean that this would be effective January 26 on, but be effective for communities back to 2011.
Anyone who's adopted the Uniform Common Interest Community Code?
Who comes under the jurisdiction of that act, yes, ma'am. Okay,
And what's
so
it called? The Uniform Common Interest,
Uniform Common Interest Ownership Act.
and that was 2011.
No, this went into effect January of 1999.
So what was the effective date of 2011? Why are we referring to that?
There is a section in the Uniform Act that states that for a common interest community, says amendments to this, I'm reading section 1-201. It says that amendments to this title apply to all common interest communities that contain 12 or more units that may be used for residential purposes and are created after January 1, 2011, or are subject to this title by amendment of the declaration, regardless of when the amendment of this title was adopted in a state. So you've added a provision there signaling to these entities that after that date, any amendments to the title are going to apply to them. So you have a less of a constitutional concern because you put those entities on notice that this section could be amended in the future and the amendments will apply to it.
Right. Then I would boldly propose that we strike section 6.
So section 7 is where you get into the kind of meat of what the sections are going to further prohibit.
But before you go to that, Cam, let's
Yeah,
go
right.
back to what it is we're doing. We're saying that it was this 2011 date. We're saying that we gave them notice ahead of time that there may be some amendment that may affect them. And whether or not they recognize that fine print, I don't know what the implications of it, given how long we're talking about it. So my question is, what's the worst that could happen? If you think of scenarios in which there could be such an amendment, how would it affect the people who are affected?
So what you're doing in section 7 is you are stating that these common interest communities that have been organized and they may have certain restrictions that they've applied to themselves, you're negating those restrictions as it relates to the things in section 7. So if you have a group of individuals who live in a condo association and they've decided, or the declarant who created the condo decided that this community, you're not going to be able to lease your units out to other individuals based on this change, that would all become void.
Or would become?
Any of those restrictions would become void at that, I mean, right. So
So the restrictions that we're talking about are being able to rent it for, yeah, okay.
So we start in section 7. And if you all recall, we talked about the first provision is about leasing units. And so this is, Senator Brock, this is the consequence here on the 1, any covenant, restriction, condition, and any deed, contract, security instrument, or other instrument affecting the transfer or sale of your interest in a common interest community. And any provision of a governing document associated, such as a declaration, bylaw, or rule, that either effectively prohibits or unreasonably restricts a unit owner from leasing the individual unit owner's unit, is void and unenforceable. So at that point in time, you joined your common interest community back in 2013. You purchased that unit, and in the deed, it has this restriction, among potentially other restrictions, saying you cannot lease this unit out and no one else in this community can lease the unit out. You've purchased it with that understanding. If this were to go into effect, that restriction itself would then become void, since you or anyone in the community would be able to lease the unit out at that point. Subject to the other restrictions in here.
Right.
But not as a short-term rental, which will be further down.
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
But, and then section 2, you think takes care of the concerns that have been raised to us about affordable housing covenants and other loans.
So a few concerns have been raised, and I will try my best to articulate them and hopefully not lose any of them. And one of the concerns that was raised was, what do you do about the covenants that have been put into place to maintain affordability of a unit? You receive some sort of state funding, that assist, you know, a low, moderate income individual in purchasing the house in the condo association, and they put in a covenant that, you know, you have to maintain the affordability of the unit. I don't know what all these programs are and what their restrictions are, but just for argument's sake, that's what we're talking about. And there was a question about, does this language then nullify those if those restrictions say that you can't lease the unit out? We're providing you money for a down payment on a house for you, and you meet our qualifying criteria. Could be a program for low income individuals, and we're going to say you can't then turn around and lease the unit and make money off of it.
Right.
It's not the purpose of the program. The purpose is to help you become a
Or-
homeowner.
Oh, so were you gonna address the second concern about
Yes,
any
ma'am.
loan?
I'm gonna come back to,
For a
that, yes, ma'am. So what I did was to address that concern.
That's the CHT's concern,
Yes, ma'am.
and that's on top
I don't
of
want
page
to-
13.
I don't want to speak for them, but yes,
Yeah.
ma'am, that's my understanding. So the bottom
No,
of
we
page,
talked about it, yeah.
right, the bottom of page 13, I added in this subsection F. So this is new language where I said, notwithstanding any provision of that section, nothing shall invalidate or otherwise void any housing subsidy covenant authorized and recorded in compliance with the correct citation
The correct citation for affordable housing.
for the housing subsidy covenants.
Okay,
So that addresses that concern. There is a separate concern, as I understand it, that has been raised by certain credit unions, et cetera. I believe a similar concern was raised by the State Housing Authority about the resale of these mortgages on the secondary market, et cetera. So
got it.
we're getting
It
in,
was just that they have a 50-50.
so we're
So we're
straying.
back, where are we now? Back on page 11? No.
This isn't in the bill. I haven't done
Okay.
anything about this in the bill. This is when you, for example, when you look at the memo
The memo.
that was provided
From what?
by Vermont Housing Finance Agency.
Right.
And I'll just read from it. You know, it talks about these sections. And it's talks about the concern of the overbreadth creates serious secondary risk. Many mortgages eligible for sale to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac include occupancy and leasing restrictions required by their underwriting. If such provisions are deemed void, even if permitted in a condominium document, the affected mortgages could become ineligible for purchase on the secondary
Got
market,
it.
which could increase the costs and reducing access to mortgage. So if these entities can't turn around and sell these mortgages on the secondary market, they might not provide them altogether, or they might charge higher rates in order to access those because they can't sell them on the secondary market. So the proposal was, at least from DHFA, was to strike this information. So this is any covenant, restriction, or condition contained in a deed, contract, security, instrument, or other instrument affecting the transfer or sale of an interest in a common interest community. They're proposing to strike that so as to alleviate that concern about selling these on the secondary market. I haven't done that because I think by doing so, you somewhat hollow out the point of adding this to begin with. What do I mean by that? If you strike that first piece, you leave in the next condition, which is any provision of a governing document, such as a declaration, bylaw, or rule, would still remain. What does that do? Well, that means that if I create a common interest community and I put these covenants in the deeds associated with the common interest community, that would be okay if you strike that language. But I wouldn't be able to have a HOA's bylaws prohibit the subleasing of the unit. Right? So it's addressing half the problem if you strike that language, because what you could do is you would just put the restriction in the deeds. So you wouldn't
Got
need the rule, you wouldn't need the bylaw, you don't need the HOA to enact the bylaw if you have it in the deed. So if you strike the first part, You're only addressing kind of half of the issue. Hope I'm articulating that in a way that's easy to understand. So you have a common
It's
interest.
sinking in slowly.
If you have a common interest community and you want to put certain restrictions on what people
On what people can
with
do or
the
build.
units within the common interest community, you can go about doing this multiple ways. One of them
Is
is
bylaw.
you put first though, let's say you put it in the declaration. And it becomes covenants on all of the deeds associated with the common interest community. So now it's a deed restriction.
And I forgive my ignorance, but what's don't laugh. The difference between a deed and a bylaw is what you're talking about.
Yes, ma'am. So this
that
is in the deed restriction itself. So when I go to sell it, the individual who purchased it from me is going to see those restrictions and understand that when they purchase the property. You can't purge those. Separate from that, let's say it's not in the declaration, it's not in the deed restrictions, there's no covenant, etc. But we have a common interest community. And
We
we
create
just
bylaw.
decide, hey, you know what? People are starting to make all these short-term rentals across the state. We don't want that in this community. So we're going to draft a bylaw that says that anyone living here can't lease their units. Now it's not in the deed, so it can be changed at a later date, but it's still applicable to the people who live there. And so if you strike this first half,
Which is what?
it's about the deed, the covenants and restrictions of deeds.
In one, if we strike from covenant
Well, their
down,
proposal is to strike it throughout the, so I'm just using this one example
Right.
for the arguments for this. Then the HOAs would no longer be able to enact bylaws or regulations restricting the leasing of a unit. But if the common interest community has that restriction in the declaration to begin with,
then it would still be okay.
correct,
so-
it wouldn't be covering those. I'm not saying that I'm not saying don't do this. I'm saying it's a policy decision that you all would need to
Right.
make.
So-
How expansive do you want to ensure in addressing this problem if you see it as a problem?
Thomas.
So the declaration piece for all the parcels that would be part of this, is that easy for them to just to apply it to an existing set of parcels that already are in play, that they could apply that deed restriction, or would they need each parcel owner to sign off on that? I could get how prospectively you could do this. You could entwine it in the deeds for a new subdivision, a new division, but retroactively.
Amending the declaration itself, I would want to go review the chapter and come back to you to answer that. You can amend them, I just don't know how. In doing such as putting a restriction like that would apply to everyone. I don't know what the amendments would require in that instance, so I want to review that.
Right.
Okay,
Okay, David.
turning to the banking and financial folks in the room, aren't these restrictions already in deeds?
Yes.
Well,
Could be, they could,
So what are we trying to affect that? If they're already in the deed, that restriction's in place. Why are we even talking about affecting the HOA bylaw?
so here's how I would articulate it. If the problem is that you have common interest communities and they're prohibiting people from leasing their units,
But it's not in the deed.
it might not be. It might just be in a bylaw of the common interest community. But it also separately, it could be in the deed. It could be in the
The
declaration.
deed is already taken care of.
It would be prohibited.
And the
But
deed
the-
includes the covenant, right?
It would be a covenant, yes.
Yeah, it is a covenant. So I think that part of, anyway, Chris is right behind us. We forget.
So what I'm saying is you can prohibit these things in multiple different ways, either by putting them in the deeds, putting restrictive covenants in the deeds themselves, or the common interest community could have draft their own bylaws to restrict these things. And so that's why this language is set up to address both of those situations.
But if you strike
could
one,
take
the
one
other is.
away, you could take one away and you could say, we're not going to amend the deeds. If you have it in your bylaw or if you have it in your declaration and you have restrictive covenants that say you can't lease the units, you purchased the property when, you purchased it and you knew it was there and you bought it. So we're going to leave it. We're just going to prohibit the condo association from creating a bylaw that restricted. So you're only addressing those instances. You're not addressing the instances where it exists as a restrictive covenant. So you would only be addressing certain common interest communities, potentially not all of them. And that's just a policy decision for you all.
But, and the impact on the mortgage companies is, I think, I'm fine, I get the difference between deed and the bylaw, and if we strike this, they could just create the same restriction through a bylaw. Talk to us, or help us understand, I guess I don't understand what the challenge is with the mortgage fees.
So
Forgive
what,
me.
and I'm not,
We have two.
I'm not a financial lender here. Yep. So,
Yeah, Chris.
the point is, if they have underwriting restrictions that say that you can't, you have to have certain occupancy and leasing restrictions. So if I'm going to give you a mortgage, it's your primary residence.
So
have
in the mortgage,
restrictions
it
in there that
requires
say
the
that you
fee.
can't turn around and lease the unit, right? And that's in there because I want to be able to turn around and sell that mortgage on the secondary market to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And
As a
that's
full-time
there, that's
occupied.
those requirements. And you're now taking that away from me because you're saying in this language, any covenant, restriction, condition in any deed, contract, or security interest, instrument. So that could apply to the common interest community. It could also apply to the financial institution that's lending you the money to purchase the home. And we're weeding that out. Now, all of a sudden, these financial institutions that are loaning money to you to purchase the condo, if they can't turn around and sell that mortgage in the secondary market, they may just not offer it, or they may offer it at a much higher rate.
Chris, do you have anything to add, or Peter?
Chris
Help us
Donnelly,
further.
the Champlain Housing Trust. I think including this or striking out the language that VHFA proposed supports their ability to make primary mortgages to folks with those covenants on. The second thing that Cam hasn't gotten to yet is it's the section 2 below this. Actually refers to another part of the statute which protects the ability of, well, and maybe Cam can look this up, but it allows for mortgages to be sold on the second market. It disallows the ability to prohibit those being sold on the second. I'm not saying this right because it's like a triple negative.
So,
But
so this is where this, we'll jump over.
Yep.
This goes to the question that Senator Ron Hinsdale brought up, because you have this sub 2 here, which says that nothing in the subsection prevents or prohibits a deed, contract, security interest, etc., from preventing the subleasing, I'm on line 17, from preventing the subleasing of a unit or restricting the leasing of a residential unit as authorized by subdivision 3.120F3. What is 3.120F3? It says that an association may adopt rules that affect the use of or behavior in units that may be used for residential purposes only to restrict the leasing of residential units to the extent those rules are reasonably designed to meet underwriting requirements of institutional lenders that regularly make loans secured by first mortgages on units in common interest communities. So I brought this up on Friday. The concern is, hey, we can't sell these on the secondary market, everything we just talked about. And I said, well, what about 2? 2, I believe, covers you because of what I just read. You need to hear back from them as to why they think that is not the case, if they are still raising the concern.
They being
They
VHFA.
being VHFA, the credit unions, the other entities that have brought this concern to you.
And Chris is here as well. So, because I know he represents some of us.
So as I read it, I think 2
To
and the
take care of
120F3 would alleviate the concern altogether, and you don't need to make the recommended.
You don't need to strike the first
Don't
one.
need to strike this language up here. But I'm also being transparent with you all that I don't operate in the space of lending money out to individuals to purchase condos. So hearing from them as to why they think that's not the case, hearing from the attorney that you have coming in
Right.
on common interest communities in general would probably be good up to you.
Chris, any further thoughts on, oh, we have two Chris's with thoughts on this.
I would just say that if you are not going to strike that language in one, then I would ask you to leave the exemption down below where
Right.
there's the covenants.
Right.
I think F is important to keep because you want to ensure that those housing subsidy covenants, the first piece that I talked about a little while back, you want to ensure that you're not voiding those out or I believe that you want to ensure that you're not voiding those out. Okay, so I'd be happy to also kind of type this up or kind of draft it up in a question format that you all could have and ask others. As it relates to.
Yeah, so we hope he'll be in the room with us when we have.
I will do
Yeah.
my best.
Probably
Okay.
should simply have a judge of the.
Right, dividing the baby.
Okay,
Let's just keep going.
Yep.
I think that concern is
Yes.
sinking here.
Yes, okay, so the other piece that's in this amendment is here in the subsection C. So above, if you remember, you had the change in the leasing. So individuals who are in these common interest communities would be able to lease their homes moving forward. You also have the sub B about family child care home. So those are the two pieces that were in the draft as it was introduced. Then you get to the sub C, which is new. Yes, sir.
Well, before you gloss over that, I have this email from Mara Collins this past Friday. We all received it on what you just glossed over, the family child care home piece. Are you familiar with this, Pam? So she raised the concern that the mortgage programs that they have the people sign an affidavit that they will not use more than 15% of the total area of the property for the home, business, or commercial use, and not more than 15% for the cost of the property will be deducted from home business.
Yes,
So would this circumvent or nullify those affidavits, creating a concern that she has?
right. I sent that to Cam and he's seen it and we have not included that language yet for us to have the conversation.
Well, so it's like that, it's a policy decision for you all, right? BHFA is saying that we lend these monies out and we have people, agree that they're not going to use these homes for certain business activities. And
And the
this
X percent,
would change it and it would say, you can't do that. In a common interest community, an individual would have essentially the right to run a family child care home and it's the policy decision.
but can't you qualify and say unless an owner if an owner has a mortgage with these restrictions, then these don't apply. But for the people who don't have a mortgage with those restrictions, this would apply. Can't you differentiate?
You possibly could, but I guess my immediate question would be, are you wanting to single out for one financial institution only? If you get a mortgage through BHFA, then you can't do this, but if you get a mortgage through anyone else, you can.
Yeah, but if you have, there may be other institutions that have those restrictions that in their mortgages. Can't we simply say if you have a mortgage with an institution that restricts your use this way, this doesn't apply, but if you have a mortgage with that allows this, these restrictions are lifted. But why can't we differentiate the institutions?
I'd be happy also to talk to Maura because I feel like you could do the opposite.
Yeah.
They could say, oh, I guess what she's saying is it's a loan at a higher level than this individual. But because if you just said to this individual, we can't offer you this loan option, it's an IRS restriction that, you can't get tax exempt loan dollars and have more than 15% of your property be a business, then they don't have access to that
To
loan
that option, to
Yeah.
that loan option. I think,
I didn't think in-home,
are there,
like, it's an in-home, it's a home-based childcare.
right, no, are there other mortgages that stipulate this kind of thing in HOAs? I guess this is a question for our HOA, lawyer.
So I can't answer the question.
What?
I don't know what restrictions certain
Other-
financial.
yeah,
entities
other-
put on the question for them.
Chris?
Chris Rice from MMR for Vermont Mortgage Bankers Association. Some of our members are looking into the same issue and have the same concerns raised by Maura. It gets really complicated really quick because it's not just what's in your mortgage or your HOA. It's what the secondary market is looking at and whether they will purchase those mortgages that it becomes complicated. So to the extent that you have time to hear from the experts, that'll probably be more efficient for you. That would be my suggestion, but
So if you identify somebody, we'll have more, and we'll hope to have people in on Friday. That's when we have time to address it. So let's do that.
thank you.
Chris and Maura, great.
Okay, so
I think, okay,
I think we're,
Yeah, I mean, I just think this, like, let's put childcare aside, like. People have a hard time making money, you know, if we try to say you can't have. An in-home business in a common
Right.
interest community, like, I certainly like to
also-
deal with the IRS, but I don't wanna make this so broad. I'd actually like to fight the federal government on this, on this question, you know, like.
exactly. I think that might be harder to do this year. But I think that, also with the, move to so much remote work, it just strikes me, this is really
Yeah,
restrictive.
this is silly.
I mean, this post-COVID seems ridiculous. I guess.
If somebody wants to make jewelry, like, right, you know? Right.
okay,
So
Yeah.
it's we will get, so who are the people we need to hear from? PHFA, mortgage, people, and, we'll also hear from Christina and the other person who I forwarded you that other email.
And you do have still the person who actually have their home-based childcare shut down. I didn't know
Have
that.
her as well.
Okay,
Do we have her name?
yes, yeah,
Yes,
okay,
right.
it's the board name.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're gonna have to clarify this for our understanding, for us to make a decision on this, but, okay, let's keep going. Because we have a new proposal on another restriction to lift.
if you go to the bottom of page 12, this is the main amendment here, the bottom of page 12, top of page 13, you see this new highlighted language, this is a new addition to this section.
We've talked about it in the committee, but
Yes.
we haven't seen language on.
So related to accessory dwelling units, so the number 1 here on the top of page 13, the sub 1, it's all the same lead-in language, covenants, restrictions, conditions, and deeds, declarations, bylaws, rules, etc., that effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict a unit owner from building an accessory dwelling unit on the property restricted to the exclusive use of the unit owner is void and unenforceable. I want to highlight a few quick things. First off, this would only apply to a planned community and would not apply to a condominium.
Right, sure. Because it doesn't make much sense for a company.
And so second is the subdivision 2, which says that the subsection C only applies to a planned community where the unit owner has the right to an exclusive use of greater than 1/4 of 1 acre.
And I'd like to suggest, unless this was based on something,
It's based on my suggestion.
that it's a 1/4 or greater.
That was something I was going to raise.
Yeah. 1/4, which is small, right?
But not greater than a lot or 1/4.
Yeah.
Please.
If you want 1/4 to be the minimum,
Yeah.
then yes, ma'am, it should be changed.
Okay, so great.
1/4
For
of
great,
an acre
thanks.
or greater, and happy to make that change.
Yes, thanks.
And then it just has the tie back to the definition of an accessory dwelling unit.
Right. Right.
Okay,
D and E are renumbered, and then F, we address,
F we spoke about
Are
is the
people-
housing subsidy covenants that you don't want to make.
Could we stay on this for a second? Because I was taking my parents to look at houses that South Burlington that are in planned communities. And I don't know exactly what we mean by exclusive use of greater than 1/4, because there are some that say anything everyone else can see is like not your exclusive use. You can't leave a bike outside. You can't have a garden outside. Like, I'd like to make sure this definition works. And a lot of them don't have fences. So they exclude you from having,
Fences?
yeah. A lot of them don't have a fence around each individual unit. It's a huge thing. Yeah. And so I don't want exclusive use to have a loophole in it.
Thomas, same type of thought.
I'm not against any of this, but the 1/4 acre, I mean, there are parcels that can go up, so like a second
Yeah.
story accessory dwelling unit on a smaller acre. I'm just wondering
That's
why.
good.
I just,
1/4 acre.
I just chose a 1/4 acre because it seemed like a size that made sense in a planned community that would make sense to have enough room for an accessory dwelling unit if it was not attached. Remember, they don't need to be attached. So it could be, that gives you enough land to have you could also go out.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm happy. I just think we wanted to make sure that accessory dwelling units were included in this provision of HOA.
Right.
Because that's where the
But it's
concern first came
that point still well taken that
There are houses in Essex that are smaller than a 1/4 of an acre.
Right.
You can put something above the garage.
there were
Yeah.
also, I mean, we talked to Wheelpad, there were also ADUs that attach to the house.
Yeah,
They're not a
absolutely.
separate facility. So
the idea came to us
no,
from,
can we just say like 0.2?
well, can I just ask, the person who had brought it to us is sitting here, Megan Sullivan, would you be kind of introduce yourself and talk?
Remember, she was talking about like points you get or don't get.
No, but
I'm the one who said you
We
have
don't
to
have the
allow.
time to go into it, but I
Megan
do have the
Sullivan,
time to do this. So.
Here as a resident of Jericho, Vermont, HOA, restricted individual. Yeah, so I mean, for, where I live, it's 1 acre and you're not gonna, no additional units.
No, that's why I
are
was-
allowed. Anyway, so whether it's 0.2 or 1/4,
Or
whatever it is, I see the point of, if you're living in attached units, saying we're gonna build an ADU is challenging, but for detached, single family
Yeah, this is
houses,
for
whether it goes up
But it's
or.
not just for detached.
That's the
if it's-
implication, I believe.
I mean, if it's attached, I assume it's condoized and you don't actually own your land. It's commonly owned land that your unit, so you own your unit, but you don't own the land. It would be if it. I don't actually know if that's,
So Cam, we need to clarify.
Chad is giving me serious eyebrows, so I think I'm totally wrong on
We
that.
spent
I have
so
no-
long on ADUs, and ADUs could be a lot of different things.
Right.
Right,
And you could say, I have a disabled family member that needs a wheelchair accessible unit. We're going to attach it to the house.
Right, it could be attached, it could be
Yeah.
above, it could be a separate.
Pertinent to, but attached, or it could be adjoining and separate. And so the point is well taken that if you want to say, I mean, this is where we could over define things and essentially, yes, I would say we should have a lower threshold if it's attached.
Okay, so we're intimacy.
I was just gonna pull up the definition
Yeah.
with reference to, and it doesn't say that it needs to be attached or.
Unattached, exactly. We created.
It could be all those things.
Yeah.
So I don't want to mess with that, but I do want to clarify the exclusive use question. If you want to make sure it's on land that people own, because obviously, and I thought you had done that with only applies to a planned community. And is there a definition of a planned community that it had? Yes, okay, so there's a definition of ownership in that. So I think the questions are, guys are okay with including ADUs, is exclusive use and what size, if it's 1/8 of an acre or more, 0.2, whatever.
An eighth.
Just to clarify, exclusive
seems
use is really where you segregate out condominiums because they're all common land when it's a condominium.
Yes.
So if it's just exclusive use, I feel like you're getting what you're after.
I hope so.
Drawing a parcel
that's-
size
yeah.
threshold, but
That's our question for our lawyer.
Right, and like,
Oh,
where I am, we have, yeah,
You have exclusive
We have
use of that 1 acre.
right, and there are restrictions in our bylaws
Yeah, yeah,
about how,
right.
you know, where the fence can go on your exclusively used land, but we also have common land.
Right.
So this would not say that
Right.
we,
This is
that
the land that
anyone,
you have
person
exclusive
could
use of.
build something on the commonly owned land.
So I like what Thomas said. We could say if they have the right to exclusive use, you don't have to put it. The problem I'm having, Madam Chair, is every time we put in a unit amount, it confuses people and then they say, I thought you said I couldn't build more than 2 units on
So-
1/4 of an acre. And they like, we don't need to do that.
So we could just not specify the size of the lots. And
Madam Chair, I will just inform you, I have a hard stop in 5 minutes.
yes, and we do too.
Okay.
So
And I apologize,
But-
I'm just letting you know.
I am happy to do that. I mean, this was just simply to get the ADUs in and I just thought it made sense that we wanted them on all sizes. Dave.
The only hesitation I have about this is that planned communities typically have kind of an aesthetic look. It's a community that has common interests, and if they restrict somebody from building an ADU, which is essentially, say they dragged in a manufactured home and put it into part of their property, this seems to avoid the community saying, it doesn't quite fit.
I think they
wondering if
still
that-
get to say the paint color and stuff in a lot of these.
I think the bylaw,
So I'm wondering if this is trying
Yeah,
to
that's a-
overrule bylaws that
that's a good
restrict
question.
aesthetic considerations.
Megan, would your HOA then have a requirement on, I mean, one assumes that any other requirement about what it looks like and what feels like and applies. It's just this,
I'm right, or you have to get it approved, right? Like right now, if you're wanting to put up a fence, you have to get it approved by the, you know, head honchos of the HOA governing board.
Right.
So I
Now,
would-
but with this law, with this language unreasonably restricted, they may say, look, I can't afford the construction costs of what you want me to build, and this is what I can afford, and they could unreasonably restrict this person to build the.
yeah, but the person, I assume that if a person wants to build an ADU, they have the money to do it.
Well, I'm saying that if they propose to bring in something or build something which doesn't fit the aesthetic nature of the community, this says this unreasonable restriction phrase could allow them to bring in anything.
So we've had a lot of discussion around aesthetics. And that is a common discussion in form-based code and zoning in every community. Generally where we've landed is that if you could do something to your single family home that you could then do to this accessory dwelling unit, they would be treated under the same rules.
I would assume they would be treated under, can we check that, Pam? And
So if you're required to have like white siding or something, they
And
can
black
still require
gutters,
that
you
of
still
your
have to-
ADU.
yeah. Could
I
we,
don't think there's anything in the language that would prohibit them from still requiring the similar aesthetics, but I think it is a good question to raise. Of
Yeah.
what is unreasonable restriction? And I'd be happy to look into that, and then maybe a good question to ask the attorney.
The attorney. because it would, I would assume that all the other restrictions were up in terms of color size. Setbacks, all would apply.
Facade,
But
window decoration, right?
But I will echo that the language here does say you cannot unreasonably restrict someone from building ADUs. So somebody could argument could be made that your conditions you're putting on the aesthetics of the the location or restricting the location criteria, you have to have a certain setback, et cetera, effectively prohibits me from being able to build an ADU. So
It has to be limited to the kinds of things that would have applied to a single family home. They can't make special rules for your ADU. So I think you could borrow from probably the Home Act. The areas we poured over with a lot of municipalities about, you know, what a reasonable or unreasonable restriction is, because you just couldn't apply it differently to a multifamily unit than you would a single family unit in the same footprint.
Okay, same concern. We want to make sure that unreasonable doesn't backfire.
I'm gonna mention one other thing, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So the only other edit or the only other change in this draft is I've removed the section related to mobile home lot rents.
Wait a minute, but to get to F, also after we haven't talked about F.
No,
Bring
yes,
us
we
up.
did. We did, because remember, that's adding in that the home covenants,
Right. No, this works. I think F works for us in
Yes.
solving
the
the
housing.
affordable housing
Yes, ma'am.
subsidy. Okay. So sorry, keep
So
going.
then you have the section on electrical vehicle supply equipment.
Right.
And I removed the section related to mobile home lot rent.
Right,
Then you get to section 9 about the Vermont Economic Development Authority. This is where it's
The VEDA,
amending the
yeah.
definition of eligible facility to allow VEDA to fund certain multi-unit
and
housing developments.
I think we're good to go on that section. That is the one section I think we have basically all greenlit with the VHFA and VEDA coming into Kumbaya.
So just highlight the addition of that
Right.
on lines 11 and 12 that I added
Yeah.
at the request of.
On page 18.
And I have to witness, since I requested this morning that I emailed you with your first and supported housing. I think there are
I
things
have.
that we could do that are not
Yeah.
just a task force that would be helpful.
And
It's not a
I'm
task force, it's an advisory.
going to vacate.
Great, and we are going to, thank you, guys. I think we made some good progress, and I think Cam would want to, if we can get rid of of qualifying the size of the HOA and just say exclude at anything that where you have the exclusive use of that property.
I will take a look at this.
Great,
Okay, thank you.
great, thank you.
I'm sure it's even 11:45, we present a bill down in another committee, but I fully support this resolution. So if
Right.
you both need to vote, please put it over.
Great. Thank you.
And if I have to meet with my child, I did
Okay. Hi, welcome. We're going to shift to the Ukraine and the 4-year anniversary of this horrific invasion. Thank you for your words this morning. Thank you, Michael, for drafting this resolution. The resolution is now in our committee for us to take action on. Do we have a copy? Yes, we have a copy.
It should be, Madam Chair, I sent an electronic version to your committee assistant earlier this morning. So
Thank
she
you.
can print it off and distribute. Yes.
Good morning. Before we go through it, we would love to hear you tell us. Tanya, it's yours. You go with what you'd like.
So for the record, Senator Tanya Vygotsky, this resolution, does acknowledge, what is happening in Ukraine and what has been happening really since March of 2014, but more aggressively since February of 2022, with a particular focus on the impact to civilian infrastructure and children. The Senate in the General Assembly in Wisconsin passed a somewhat similar resolution earlier this year. And a friend of mine there sent me their language, which we crafted into our format and our language with some additions, particularly around the hits to civilian infrastructure, given how much that has increased in the last month or so. People in Kiev are living without power. It is 4 degrees. People across the country can't send their children to school because they have no heat. And I think it's, for me, like really important to focus on the impacts, to civilians and children, sorry.
Yeah, no. It's very good.
The other important thing that I don't think we have talked about enough and that is highlighted in the bill is the tens of thousands of children that have been kidnapped, sent to re-education camps, forcibly adopted into Russian families while they have Ukrainian families at home that love them. That is a war crime. And I,
It's okay, take a sec.
and I just think it's important that we stand in solidarity with people who are under occupation, under constant air raids, and the children whose lives will forever be disrupted. And so that is what this resolution is for. The resolution would go to the Russian and Ukrainian ambassadors to the United States, as a statement of our solidarity and our condemnation of the war crimes that are occurring daily.
Thank you for doing this, and thank you for, being, needless to say, I think all of us have been hearing in the news has been full of this anniversary and the ongoing, and certainly the air raids and drone attacks and the number of people who are living without water, electricity, heat, anything, and how they are managing to do it is beyond certainly comprehensive, but
Language was also drafted in conjunction with people who are living in Ukraine and going through these conditions every day. Some of these words are their words.
thank you. Thank you. Any, David?
Yeah, just wondering, why not include the, as far as delivery to our federal delegation and US Secretary of State? You know, like bump it up or what, you know, if it goes overseas, what net effect will there be?
Well, so this would go to the ambassadors here in the US, but I'm also, if you would like it delivered to more people, I am more than happy to have it delivered to more people.
I'm good.
What?
I'm good with expanding the scope of delivery.
Yeah.
Significant.
Yes.
It's no reason not to.
Well, to the President of the United States would help too. Yeah,
If I may. Madam
Yes,
Chair,
Michael.
I could certainly do a fast amendment after if it's the will of the committee to include the president. And if you do that, I would also recommend that you add the congressional delegation, our congressional delegation, which is really standard when I do the president. I normally on any of these.
I would absolutely support that. And thank you for raising.
That's an easy question.
yeah.
Are we on to like just going through the wording?
We will do that with Michael, I think. Thank you, Tom. Thank you. We will move on this as quickly as we are able.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, we appreciate your keeping our eye on the ball and having gone this summer.
Yes, I did spend 12 days with Ukraine this summer.
And you're staying, which I mean, I have a little preamble, but I fully support this resolution. I don't want to slow it down unnecessarily. And I don't want looking at certain words to be taken as any disagreement. We just have a responsibility to make sure these words are used properly and cited. So again, I just don't want it to be triggering or activating, but I have word choice questions.
Okay, right.
Brian has been the leader of this all along. You know, first resolution was 4 years ago. And
Yeah.
listening to radio and TV mentioning this is the 4th anniversary, I remember the resolution worked on this, how long ago it was.
If I may, Michael Churnick, Legislative Council. Before I start, I just wanted to explain a little bit of how the mechanics of how this happened. There was a Wisconsin resolution. This language is not verbatim from Wisconsin. We made some changes. I pointed out some concerns that I had, the things that I thought we should change here, and given the fact that it was already 6 months later. And then I did a draft, and then Senator Vachowski, emailed it to various contacts in Kyiv and elsewhere in Ukraine, who are obviously English fluent. And they made some comments, and then Senator Vachowski sent me some modifications and additions. And then I incorporated all those modifications and additions. And then what you're seeing now reflects both the some of the Wisconsin, some of what Senator Bahusky and I did together, and then some comments that came back from Ukraine that we incorporated in. And what I could do is, if you want me to, I know Senator Rob Hinsdale has some suggestions. Would you want me to go through it clause by clause, or however you want me to? I'm happy to proceed according how you'd like me to do.
Oh, you just have 20 minutes.
We have 20 minutes. I think if people have had a chance to read it, it's fairly long. So I think going through it clause by clause might be a little time consuming. But if people have concerns, I'm fine with it as it is, but I know Keisha has concerns. Or has some language questions.
Yeah, I think one could consider them all technical or grammatical, but that's important. Like
Let's
we're saying something,
Dive in.
you know.
You would, Senator Ron, if you could tell me which
Yeah.
clause you're in.
So
Yeah, right.
are we ready for that?
Yeah.
Okay. So the second whereas clause,
Okay.
this is more technical than grammatical.
That it begins, whereas this
Yeah.
unjustified.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it says was initiated with the illegal invasion of Crimea. I circled the word illegal because we don't cite under which international agreement it is illegal.
It was not related to any particular statement, but just the fact that it was an invasion of another country. And that language actually came from Wisconsin.
And that's kind of what, you know, like, I just want to make sure we own this language and we understand the use of
I mean,
it.
one option is to take the word illegal out, or you could use a different word, for example,
Outrageous.
outrageous or.
I
you
don't
know,
like those kinds of words
Right.
because I don't think they are factual, right? Like I've always been taught that resolution should have us, like we should be endorsing the factual statements in the whereas, not using inflammatory language. So I'm happy to say illegal as long as we cite.
Do you want to say horrendous? Or,
No, I don't.
No, I think that.
I want, if it is
Illegal is a
illegal,
better word if there's a definition.
yes.
And
Illegal
doesn't
under
have to be
what?
Stated, but commonly accepted definition.
I think you could, I suspect that I could find under international law or some sort. I
Right.
have no doubt of
We
that.
should cite the international law that it's illegal at each time.
Okay.
In the third whereas, I don't want to debate this forever, but I think it says which has wrought havoc, but it should be which have wrought havoc because you're referencing three different.
But if they're only.
We actually talked about that. I think
Okay.
our editors. Aside from you two, and the underlying on some of
There are
I
three
think it
things-
was referring to the overall invasion. And I have been through our editors.
And this is what the editor
Okay,
chose.
then I
that-
don't
that
want
was the
to
editor.
die on this.
That was the editors.
So what's the next one? On page 2.
Page 2, I think it's just how it's worded at the
Which
top.
clause are you in, Senator?
Before the top sentence, a minimum of 16 documented deaths with likely more undocumented and
I'm gonna go
injury.
back to the prior sentence, so I think.
Yeah.
We are in the March 9th.
It's a lot of comments.
Attacked of the Attorney Hospital. That was from, I could, I mean, if it makes it easier, I could say with a number of documented deaths and leave it at that.
Well, no, or I'm sure there are undocumented deaths and injuries. So you could just say.
Yeah, leave that okay for documentation, but we could, if you are concerned about the number 16,
No,
as I said.
no,
No.
sorry, Michael, we don't have a lot of time, so if I could just suggest that it says a minimum of 16 documented deaths and countless injuries or, you know.
Many,
And
many
things
more
with like
undocumented
it's just, yeah, otherwise it's a very confusing.
How about, and with countless injuries? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're documented or they're not.
I think,
Yeah.
I think kind of
And
probably want to
cognizant-
keep undocumented in there.
It's the use of the phrase with likely more undocumented in
Yes.
the middle of that last phrase.
And it's said something like, and more undocumented and more injured and undocumented.
Right, a
How about-
minimum of 16 documented deaths
And more.
and
injured.
likely more undocumented deaths and injuries.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it is.
Well,
Well, that's, okay, so not, so likely more undocumented.
And
otherwise, it sounds like you're saying a minimum of 16 documented deaths and injuries. which I don't know if that's, and it's just the but
So,
Yeah.
but to be absolutely clear, Senator, so there's no mistake in what I'm supposed to be doing. Deaths and likely more undocumented deaths and injuries.
Next one.
In the first whereas clause, that school there potentially a war crime. I think we should just know if it's a war crime or not, and if we believe it's a war crime, we should state it's a war crime.
And because it hasn't been there, I don't think.
It hasn't been adjudicated.
Yeah, and this
You,
way
then you
it's-
could, no, but then you would say which would constitute,
well, we know
war
this way was being a little more cautious.
I guess like I don't like these qualifying words.
What was I made it qualifying and
Yeah.
cautious.
Right, but I guess my suggestion would be saying which would constitute a war crime, because otherwise it's saying the forcible
Well,
transfer of
that's-
children may or may not be a war crime.
My decision not to do that was I didn't want the resolution to per se say that it was a war crime, but say, yeah, there's real
Then you
potential.
could say something like, in all probability is a war crime.
Or just,
There's an idea.
How about that? Something like-
where is it considered a war crime? Under what? Is it the
Probably on
Geneva?
the Geneva Convention.
So I would
Yeah.
say which would constitute a
And
violation of the Geneva.
Well, I need to then check that, because I
That's,
can violate.
I would check it, because I want us to, we have to stand up on the floor and say, little,
Transferring from one to another.
Um,
Which probably violates the Geneva.
No, I would say which probably constitutes a violation of the Geneva Convention.
Leaving the word probably in there.
Well, if you're wanting to be cautious, I would use the word probably.
Which
I
probably
think
violates.
Or I would just check the fact whether taking children like this, I think it is a war crime.
I think there was
So I would
reference
look
to
at the
that.
Geneva
I
Convention.
think the reason we're getting hung up is because you're convicted of a war crime, ultimately. Violating the Geneva Convention is not in and of itself it being adjudicated as having committed a war crime. You are being found in violation of something that could then be taken to the international court as a war crime. So I think the problem is trying to name something a war crime
Before it's a.
before it's
Then
adjudicated.
how about just ending the sentence after the wording of it?
But I understand the power of referencing that transferring children is a violation of international law
Exactly.
and our war
Which is,
conventions.
yeah, and if you could either do research the Geneva Convention, or you could say which in all probability constitutes a violation of.
Mhm. I mean, to me, this conversation is really important, because if we went out
Yeah.
that this is a war crime, like, we need to cite that.
So how
Yeah.
about which in all probability violates the Geneva Convention? Which in all probability is a war crime under the Geneva Convention?
No,
I wouldn't say that. I would keep to, in all probability constitutes a violation of the Geneva Convention.
Possibility constitutes, okay.
work on the wording later, but
Yeah.
just make sure, just maybe bring the Geneva Convention.
That's why I did,
Right.
As opposed to some. The
So-
Convention has-
that's why, as I said, senators, I was cautious in my use of language.
I guess cautious to me is not the same as equivocating, which I worry is not cautious. It's just not a good practice in a foreign relations.
Well, there's sometimes when the legislature is just speaking generically, a
Yeah.
comment on one of these. As you said, I want to be able to be certain, so I'll say possibly or probably, just to hedge a little bit that I'm not saying absolutely for certain, but there's a consensus that it may well be.
That, let's just start there, but I,
Okay, your next concern.
Yeah.
Because you have a
Before I
couple.
go on to beyond this paragraph, let me back up to the bottom of page 1. Whereas, March 9, 22, I'm still unclear.
We're on March 9, 2022.
Yeah, right, an attack maternity hospital, Russian forces attacking hospital.
Yeah.
In Maryland, causing at least 4 deaths, including 1 child, and a minimum of 16 documented deaths. the 16 part of the 4? Why was
I
16
think that was,
documented, listed separately from the 4 that,
And then
based upon the material I had, it's way, I mean, we could do it to something to the effect causing a number of deaths.
yes,
that's
Well, I would say causing a number of deaths.
or causing a number of additional deaths.
Could you bring the source material?
I have it here.
Okay,
why additional? Why was it 4 and then 16?
That is a great-
additional? Why are they separate?
I was trying to understand all the comments and I missed the, yeah.
I think in all the commas and the wording of that, I missed this.
Yeah.
I wasn't happy to.
Okay, let's
So-
let's flag that, but I want to make sure we have all the concerns identified, so that Michael can work on them and with Tanya.
I'd submit that the whereas which Randy is highlighting be more effective if we use the total number of casualties as opposed to a single incident.
Yes.
It would be much, much more compelling, but I'll leave it up to them.
Let me go back as opposed. Here on March
Because we
9,
don't
20
reference that again, you're right. I agree with David. I think the cumulative effect of the number of people who've died in this,
Assuming you got the.
Actually, actually, I'm looking at it. They killed at least 4 people, including 1 child,
in the,
and injured at least 16 others.
I understand
So what did we do?
more people have died on the Russian side of this than during World War II. And hundreds of thousands of people. died.
Wait, over a million
Like,
people.
I know, I was like, wait.
So the difficulty with these numbers, just if I might, Senator Tanya Bugowski,
Yeah.
the difficulty with the numbers, particularly in the siege of Mariupol, is that we don't know. There are mass graves that have not been excavated. There are people who have disappeared and might be prisoners, and so it may make sense. But the siege of Mariupol did start with bombing of a maternity hospital, which is likely a violation of the Geneva Convention.
Yeah.
And went on for nearly 3 months. And was really when the civilian attacks escalated.
Yeah.
Which is part of, as I said, the focus in this was to some extent the civilian impact. The estimate coming out of Ukraine is as many as 25,000 people may have died in the siege of Mariupol.
Yeah.
Well, that's more compelling than
That
4 deaths in March 9.
But this was
Yeah.
looking at the maternity
The
hospital.
maternity hospital specifically.
But what I'm looking at here now in my sources, it would be more accurate to say, talk to maternity hospital, the great, Mariupol, Europe, causing at least 4 deaths.
I wonder-
Injuring at least 16 others.
Yeah.
That's the information I have.
But I think the cumulative number of deaths in Mariupol is much more compelling than just the hospital, even though the hospital triggered it. You have a.
I do.
initial thought.
I wonder if we might state that on March 9th, this maternity hospital was bombed, kicking off the siege of Mariupol, which has
Leading
resulted in an estimated
to over
25,000 deaths.
25,000.
But now I'm looking,
That's
I don't
much more
immediately
compelling.
have that 25,000. You do?
We'll get it to you.
Okay.
Okay.
And it is
You-
an estimate, again.
So you understand sort of our intent on that. I think let's take that away. I think it's much more compelling. to
And
have a-
you would
have a
also
larger
like
number.
to have the total impact
Yeah.
in there
I
as
think
well.
we need an additional whereas because at
And
this
or
moment the
could we
numbers are.
put it
aggressive.
together, you could do something to the effect of whereas on March 9, 2022, Russian forces attacked
Let's-
maternity hospital.
Let's not wordsmith it at the
Yeah.
moment. I think you have a notion of what we want to say. I want to get your initial
Mhm.
thoughts.
Hopefully they're quick.
Yeah.
Page 3.
Yeah.
The 4th line,
1, 2, 3, 4, where it begins heritage.
yes. Launching pad. It just, I don't think that's like a good phrase for a foreign relations resolution. Also serving as a launching pad for involuntary Russian family adoption.
And initiation.
Well, it's certainly when it began. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, I think let's come on.
Serving as the start of
Yeah, serving as the launch of, or it's the beginning
Yeah.
the
of the involuntary
It's just too casual.
kidnapping of
Arching pad.
the kidnapping of these Ukrainian children. So let's figure out
Okay.
something better than that.
And
I
then,
think
What-
Randy's idea of simply saying the start.
yeah,
As a starting
Of
point,
involuntary Russian.
began the voluntary in Russia, something.
Yeah.
served as the initiation.
The starting point.
Or just the starting point.
Served as the starting point. We could do that. It's easy.
Russian family adoption.
Starting.
And what's your
The
last one?
last one is deplores. The General
Wow.
Assembly, the first full result, the first be it further resolved. So the second resolved,
Mhm.
that the General Assembly deplores the Russian Federation's. Usually we condemn something.
Right, but I've used condemn in the prior paragraph.
Okay,
That's okay. There can be a lot of condemning here.
right. Deplores is,
I would not
Yeah.
use deplore. I agree.
You want to use condemn there as well?
I would
Something
use
like-
condemn.
yeah.
It's
I can go back
damning to have
condemn.
somebody
Yeah.
condemns.
I can't just condemn, but that's
Okay.
easy to fix.
Okay, and I think, and then the last result, I think we want to expand it to put the President of the United States in our Vermont congressional delegation.
That's easy to do.
Thank you, David, for catching that.
do we want to do the State Department?
Oh, and our Secretary of State.
Again,
Not so much.
they represent the president. The president.
Sure,
All the-
you're right. I think when we did the
President and the
immigration one, we had immigration and the president.
Michael, let's include the President of the United States and the Vermont congressional delegation.
And the president,
And if,
The
What?
president and the
the
federal.
president,
and the
Congressional
Vermont
delegation.
congressional
Right, yeah.
delegation, right.
along with the two ambassadors who will obviously stay.
Yes, oh, yeah, obviously. And Tanya, we could ask you and Michael to work on this and come back to us with it when you're ready, tomorrow or the next morning. Well, whatever you can do. Yeah.
The tomorrow
tomorrow would
night,
be great.
overnight, that's easy.
Perfect.
Great.
What time do you like to see us tomorrow?
We'll figure that out.
Okay.
Lord of Honor. Right, because the day is packed already, so you can imagine, but
Let
thank
me, if I need Senator DeSantis, what would be the earliest you would expect it to be tomorrow?
8:30. But it doesn't need to be 8:30, it could be at the end too. We could do it at
Whatever's
like
better for you,
10 of 12, what works for you two?
whatever can work, I can be 100%.
Why don't you just let us know how the progress you're making,
Okay,
okay?
okay.
Tanya and I will see each other at 1:15. But we'll know by then. Probably.
Okay.
Or by the end of the day. Right. Thank you, Michael, for drafting it. Thank you, Tanya, for living it and feeling.
We're doing
We're
those.
so great.
No.
We're making some changes. I'll be back.
We're making some good changes and I think with that, remember everybody, we're starting at 8:30 tomorrow morning. And I just, then I think we're ready to go.